Hey guys, this is Tom Kelly, host of the Reminiscent podcast, and the music you would be listening to would be The Story So Far's new album, but your boy couldn't get licensing, and I'm sorry for that. I don't even know how to go about it. I probably sent out 30 emails and surprisingly did not hear back from anyone. But I am here today to present you with an interview with the longtime producer of all of The Story So Far's records, Sam Pura, the founder of and chief engineer at the Panda Studios in Fremont, California. If you listen to the show, you know that this is totally different than what we usually do. If you've never heard the show before, give it a try. We talk about music, maybe some bands that you would like. We never seem to get off the Taylor Swift topic, but if you look around, there's probably something there that you might like. The interview was really interesting. To be honest, I've never interviewed anyone in my life in this format. I've done some email things back and forth, but Sam said he'd prefer a phone call, and I asked, hey, can we record it for the podcast? And he graciously agreed, so we just did the damn thing. I originally had all these questions set up because I really wanted to get in detail of how he got the sounds that he did for the record, because it's really kind of a breakthrough from their previous albums. And right out of the gate, kind of had to throw it all out the window because the interview just turned into such a drastically different thing. But it ended up being amazing. I feel like I grew as a person throughout this, and you can hear some moments of me scrambling to think of what the fuck to say next, because I just didn't. I'm not an interview. I wasn't prepared at all. But Sam's responses were just so amazing, and it was so much to really actively listen to and then process and then think of a good follow-up. I have a lot of respect for interviewers after doing this, but I won't keep it anymore. This is Sam Pura from the Panda Studios on the production of The Story So Far's new album, Proper Dose.
1, 2, 3. Now I got it even perfect for you, dude. I gave you a nice. I give you a clap and everything. We're good, dude.
All right, man. You're coming on here, and I'm putting you to work. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Not a problem. Dude.
Going above and beyond.
That's how we produce things, you know.
Right. All right, man. Well, you want to go for it?
Yeah, I'm ready. I have my friend Sean here rolling up some weed for me to smoke. I have a beer. My dog is sleeping. Everything is great. Let's do this.
Okay. So, hey, everyone. This is Tom Kelly, the not funny one from the Reminiscent podcast. I am here with Sam Pura, the owner and chief engineer at the Panda Studios in Fremont, California. And if I remember correctly, you recently opened an East Coast studio. Is that correct?
Everyone loves to think that it's an East Coast studio. However, it's not. It's actually just a second studio on the same location that I currently operate. Therefore, instead of calling it Studio A and or Studio 2 and or degrading it with a name, you know what I mean? And like, sure. I'm not trying to pass judgment on qualities of studios here. So one happens to be located towards the east and one towards the west. So I have Panda East and Panda West. Both are at the same physical location in Fremont, California.
Wow. Okay, I guess I skimmed that article then.
There you go.
Very
That's the
cool.
correct answer.
I love that. East and West rather than A and B, because there's definitely some implications that come with that.
Yeah.
So we are going to be talking today about the production of The Story So Far's soon-to-be-released album, Proper Dose. I guess as the audience is listening, it's already been out. But I just wanted to start off with a little bit about you. You've recorded some of my favorite bands of all time. It includes 100th, you got State Champs, obviously The Story So Far, and other bands that everyone else would know, Basement, Forever Came Calling, The American Scene. It looks like a lot of Pure Noise, No Sleep, Run for Cover Records bands. So do you mind giving us a little bit about how you got into audio production and the steps that led you to opening your own studio and eventually carving out a name for yourself in this genre?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to thank you for your very kind introduction. It means a lot that the albums that I have facilitated the entire sound of connect with you on a personal level and sonic level that make you want to even interview me for your podcast. So I appreciate that. That means a lot to me.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, I basically started by just being in some bands and making some records, being the guy on the other side of the glass who was actually recording. And that was a different time period where you would sit next to your amplifier as you would actually record your guitars and during the recording process. I was always kind of the guy that was obsessed with each individual's performances of the song and each, like, the entire song structure and composition as a whole, and ultimately the sounds and the instruments that we were using and the gear that we were using. And I quickly, like, realized that I should be the guy that was actually producing these bands and ultimately utilizing my natural desire to make things awesome and my natural curiosity through all these different variables be something that was a benefit to a band for a short period of time. So instead of having to be in a band and have that band be my only band, I could join them for a few songs and make songs with them and ultimately consider myself a member of that band and go from there, you know? That was much more enticing.
Yeah, that's always does seem to be the story with all the big producers that you hear of. They started off, like you said, on the other side of the glass and eventually found themselves wanting to be in that production role. They felt like they knew how to make a song be the best version that it could be.
Yep. I had plenty of friends that played in cool bands and they liked the gear that I used and they liked the sounds that I was getting in my garage with the bands that I was, like, working with on my basic Pro Tools system at my mom's house. And
Right, yeah.
it was like, I know that if this band came in here and if I set up mics on them and if I did my thing, I know that they would be getting a better sounding record than any other opportunity they have that's presenting itself to them, you know? Like, I'm the best possible option for them, and I want to leverage that and make something really cool and utilize this opportunity I have with them to make something badass, you know, as opposed to cut corners and just record a band. Instead, I always wanted to make everything count.
So you started off then just watching other people engineer your bands, or were you just kind of, I mean, were YouTube videos a thing back then?
No, YouTube wasn't a thing at all. Like, nothing like that was a thing when I started getting into recording. It was like, and if anything, Pro Tools was a brand new thing. They still had Pro Tools free when I existed, when I first started getting into it. You could download it for free and you could actually use your own interface if you had one, or like just do basic audio stuff. But like, then it started becoming parented with interfaces and became a thing. And, you know, that was a very long time ago. But ultimately, when I started going to, like, I basically graduated high school and started going to a recording school for recording and sound arts. And it was at a time period where, like, analog was still the same, was very much so the process and was the religion and was, like, you know, the tried and true method. And digital was this brand new thing that was ultimately maybe detrimental and like started inserting, and not even like detrimental. It wasn't from like a sonic aspect, but it was like really from like a operational aspect where, like, you were going to start, like, just editing drums and start, like, cutting corners as opposed to coaching good takes, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and, like, doing, like, things that, like, really matter and really make, like, a record. And so those are the things that, like, I'm really happy that I got to experience with growing up with making records when I started making records, was I've always had a huge dedication to source tone and preserving source tone and getting the best possible take and performance and the best possible source tone and exploring all the tools, as opposed to just relying on plugins and making these variable choices that, like, you know, you can always just change any of that stuff. Like, instead, I wanted to capture the best sound. You know what I mean? Like, I explored every option for the best sound, so now I'm going to capture it, you know?
Yeah, I think that definitely shows just in the quality of your albums. I mean, I don't think you would have the name that you do if you were just f***ing around with changing stuff in post, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when you start doing that stuff in post, like you're suggesting, like, it ultimately starts impairing much more of my vision, which isn't the goal. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that they should do everything my way. Mm-hmm. It's just that they should have everything. They should have a very clear vision, and I know how to utilize my tools in my way to help them get there. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, like, that's where I find, like, relying on, like, these plugins and these templates and these things like that, like, they ultimately start imparting too much of your vision onto an artist, when really, like, what we're missing in the world is more actual people following their hearts and their intuition and making music that they feel completes them, as opposed to, like, just making songs to try to fit into a mold, you know?
That's beautiful, man. That's I love that. So moving into the story so far, it looks like you've been with them pretty much since day one, with the exception of maybe like a split EP or something. Yeah. You engineered Under Soil and Dirt in 2011. Yep. According to the internet anyway, you engineered mixed, produced, what you don't see, and the same with self-titled. So
Yes.
with this new album, are you only engineering or are you seeing it all the way through to the end?
Well, that's a very good question, and that has a lot of subjective answers.
Okay.
But ultimately, from my perspective, I would say that as I started working with like 16-year-olds in high school, which were these dudes that had no following, were playing house shows, and they really like looked up to me, and they ultimately like really like valued my input and my guidance. And as records have continued to be made with them, there's been a lot more resistance to the input and guidance that I've had in terms of like external management, label, things like that. And those things like continue to present really challenging obstacles with me trying to help these individuals create the best, most natural content that's true to themselves and has the best results with longevity for their band. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So when it says engineering, I mean, what, like really break it down, like what role, like what were you physically doing? Were you sitting at the board tracking it? And again, like you said, trying to get those best takes, or was it even more hands off than that?
I'll put it this way. Like I never engineer records differently than the way that I produce and engineer records. All that is the same package when you work with me. And so let's start from the top of a song's creation. Ultimately, a song is presented to me in a way of a band playing it live, and I capture like tracks and a pre-production track of that, or they have demo tracks of ideas. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I either like I'll put them into my computer and I'll start from there and start ultimately considering, is this song the right key? Is this the right structure? Is this the right tempo? Is this like, are we missing overdub opportunities for songs? What are the vocals doing on this song? Like all these are the questions that I start presenting. And so from there, when it comes to recording drums, is this the right cymbal for the right part? Mm-hmm. Should this cymbal be a different cymbal? Should the tuning be this tuning to represent the tuning of the song? Should we change this kick pattern to match with this guitar strumming part and with this vocal? Are these the right drums in the right room? Should we explore a different room and a different drum set for this part? Now, after we move on from that, it then goes to bass. Is this the right bass? Is this the right bass note? Is this the right bass strumming pattern for the part? Is this the right amplifier? Is this the right microphone setup on the amplifiers? Do we need a bass overdub? Do we need to consider that? Then when we go with guitars, it's the exact same thing. Is this the right guitar? Is this the right amp? Is this the right mic? Is this the right thing? Are there more overdubs that were necessary? Vocals, can we tune this? Should we tune this? Is this right in tune? Is this the best natural take possible? Like, what else can we do? I ask every single question possible, and I'm ultimately the most annoying guy because I make sure that every single aspect of the record is done very well with complete attention to detail and complete 100% like respect to the basic mission statement of I play music for myself and I want to make music that is going to make me feel fulfilled and is going to make an impact on those around me. That's all I want to do. You know what I mean? Like, and you have to look at every single variable every single time, and you have to you have to work harder than every single person that's doing this, you know?
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And so it's not often like that I have the opportunity to go down those rabbit holes with every band. But when I do, I'm not often met with resistance. And more often, like with the news story, like So Far record, like there was resistance in terms of like my recommendations of like setting, scenario, pricing, length of time, et cetera, et cetera. And ultimately, like things didn't go as planned, and we needed to spend a lot more time working on the record. And that turned out to be extremely beneficial. And it allowed us a lot of room to experiment and to make a lot of different songs and a lot of different sounds and explore and to encourage ideas that wouldn't possibly make sense in a context of a short amount of time. But we ultimately got to go down those things, and it was a blessing in disguise, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And I kind of wanted to jump into things here with kind of a mile high view, like starting with the band's discography. And you've already kind of mentioned your involvement throughout the whole thing. So you're saying this album took a lot more time and it ended up being good, or a blessing in disguise. So do you feel like with all that resistance, you said you were still able to capture the essence of what has kind of brought them to this point, but also break through a barrier that may make them into a better version of themselves or a better version of the band for albums to come?
Yeah, well, absolutely. But the issue that is at hand is ultimately financially and more like morale. Like, those are the two exponential aspects of like, making a record the way that we did. You know what I mean? Is that it hurts financially and it hurts the morale because it took so much time and required so much difficulties that's my biggest fear of the longevity of the scenario,
Okay. So you think that might ultimately hurt the band's career, might pull them back a little bit, or do you still think it could be like a breakthrough album and push them forward?
It's ultimately like climbing Mount Everest. Like you climb Mount Everest and then like you're down it and then you're like, okay, well, like, was it all worth it? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's what I mean in terms of like, I don't think that like the band's career is in jeopardy.
Right.
I think it ultimately like presents like how do we move on from here creatively, and what is the right way to do such, because we just ultimately reached the pinnacle of like we could never accomplish those performances and those things again given the scenario, like a different scenario. You know what I mean? Like it's an organic experience that created itself, and like it's one that has to like, you have to set up a scenario that's going to allow that to organically create itself as opposed to expect it to just happen,
Right, for sure.
And ultimately, like, thankfully it did, but it happened at the expense of taking an extremely long time and being a very like demoralizing and inspiring experience for everyone involved. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a growing process for everyone. So I've only heard what everyone else has heard, just the single that came out. It'll actually be a year ago from tomorrow, Out of It, and then the 3 songs from the upcoming album. So I don't have anything that anyone else doesn't have at this point.
Yeah, well, I'll give my basic, like, not to interrupt you, but just to chime in real quick. I thought that there were better songs to release as the actual singles, and I think that the singles that were chosen ultimately presented themselves as a very bold move that were going to confuse people and cause a lot of like ambiguity that wasn't necessary to create, which ultimately could have been resolved with releasing a couple of different songs that are on the same wavelength of understanding of the previous songs and the direction of the new songs. You know what I mean? So the songs, like, in my opinion, like, weren't completely like rolled out correctly, and I think that there could have been better choices in that, and those are things that like I would love to have more power in flexing in the future,
For sure. There's probably something to be said, though, for releasing something that may not really give a clear view of what the rest of the album is or what they've done before. Like Taylor Swift's first single, Look What You Made Me Do, was not really indicative of the rest of the album, and it got everyone talking about it. So maybe putting out some slower songs as the singles, usually people think those are the bangers, right? So
yeah, I mean, I could see the way that you're spinning that, but unfortunately that wasn't the thought process behind the release choices.
Okay.
And therefore they didn't accomplish that in the way that you're suggesting could have been a positive, but maybe, like, I appreciate that spin, but yeah. No, that's stretching,
Well, it got me intrigued because I figured there's no way it's going to turn into like an acoustic and drum machine album. And
no, it's not like that. I mean, like, and that's the thing is there's songs that are so much like that are just single material, like just basic, like normal fucking lengths and normal structures and normal like what's expected that would have like drawn up like, oh wait, this is way better than Out of It. This is hella sick. Oh shit, I could tell that they're probably gonna like start making some softer stuff because like this song like hints at it with this section of another song, like
right.
So like there was a proper story to tell that I just like I could get a lot of flack for fucking preaching this, but it's just like, it wasn't the right choice. And I think it was an incorrect rollout. And I think that there was a better choice to be made with the amount of time, the attention to detail, and the amount of money that was spent on creating this. It should have been rolled out in a little bit of a different way.
For sure. Got it. Yeah, that definitely has me excited for what the rest of the album will reveal. Yeah, I pre-ordered it on day one. I can't wait to listen to it. With the songs that were released, like you said, I can't even imagine what they have hiding behind release date.
I won't send you the album after we're done with this, okay? So, yeah, don't ask.
I will. I'll still ask, though.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I saw on, I think it might have been on Pure Noise, they put out a a little interview with the pre-release, and Kevin was saying that they've really got into the Beatles before this album. And
why not?
I get for this all day and night, but I think the Beatles have maybe created some of my least favorite sounds I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And
well,
like,
I mean, like I'll give you the basic like proper response to that is you need to go f*** yourself and not be a fucking idiot. But I understand where you're coming from, and I've once felt that way, and that's what I think is the cool thing about the Beatles. And ultimately, you're not even at the cusp. Like once you hit the event horizon, like you'll know, and then you'll just be sucked in, and it will change your life, my friends. So, but I completely understand where you're coming from.
No, I keep trying, man. There's like no way in the world that I'm the only one that's right about this. So I have to be wrong.
You'll need to listen to my Stories of Far podcast episode on my podcast, Best Friends with Sam Pura. I think it's episode 2 or 3. It's with Garth Richardson and Stories of Far.
Okay.
Yeah, and I talk all about the Beatles, and I talk about my acid experience with the Beatles and how that enlightened me and really changed my perspective on the Beatles as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, I heard that that can definitely do it for some people.
That's basically what the Beatles are, so.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that just got me really interested because I would never put the Story So Far alongside the Beatles, but having that broad spectrum really allows for growth and really interesting songwriting. You don't just want to be pulling from bands that sound like you.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when you actually think about the individuals who are in the band, The Story So Far, and start learning about them, you start to realize that there's nothing pop punk about them. And like when you let's talk about Kevin Geyer for a minute, because like he's a beautiful, talented individual who ultimately, from my understanding, started learning how to play guitar to Led Zeppelin, and his guitar teacher taught him every Led Zeppelin song. And so he became like an extreme shredder who really understood like melody and chords and progressions, and like he is someone who I would consider one of the best songwriters I've ever worked with as a producer.
Wow.
And like he is a phenomenal singer, a phenomenal craftsman, a melody, and he doesn't listen to pop punk. Like he listens to the Beatles, and he listens to all this crazy obscure stuff, and like he's just a beautifully talented human being. Now, the second important person to talk about is Ryan Torf, who's the drummer of the Story So Far. And Ryan is like, the best way to explain Ryan is he's a dude who went to Wooly Bully. I think it's what's his fucking name? So there was a really big activist out of Berkeley, California, out here, who Wavy Gravy is his name. Wavy Gravy. He was a big activist, a political activist, and he would always dress as a clown. And he started a summer camp. And Ryan, the drummer from the Story So Far, would always go there with his brother. And Ryan learned to do gymnastics and backflip there. And Ryan basically is he can play a guitar, he can play bass. He's one of the best drummers I've ever worked with. The dude just meditates and reads books and literally just never talks, and just always is a dude who he's just witnessing and just perceiving everyone around him, and it is just being a really he's a very good watcher, and he just takes it all in and he responds correctly. He's just an extremely smart human being who writes phenomenal music. And when you put those two together, those two don't write pop punk songs. That's just not what they do. And with previous records that I've done with them, it's basically okay, well, we made this record, so now we're gonna have to make a new one. So Ryan sits on drums and Kevin sits on guitar and Kellen plays bass, and no one does anything else, and they just play music and they write song, and then the record is, you record that, and that is record. And that's so prehistoric, and that's so limiting, and that's so insulting to the actual capabilities of individuals like Kevin and Ryan, who are such phenomenal visionaries and such eclectic writers with so much skill, you know what I mean? And so that's where I find it so funny when people think about that band and they they're just pop punk. That's the only way they perceive them is through like social media and through these things. But I know these people, and all I want to do is encourage them to follow through with what is natural to them, because I think that their natural vibe and their natural like interactions with each other is actually what makes them successful. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely do think that just the blanket genre pop punk kind of does them a disservice, as even just the music that they're currently making. They do definitely stand out. I don't know what else to better classify it as, but they definitely do stand out above the genre that they are kind of pigeonholed into, for sure. Kevin and Ryan together, through the songwriting they've done previously, have always introduced much more melancholy melodies into pop punk than that have existed before. Yeah. They're not cheesy melodies. It's not like a cheesy like, oh, this is pizza and let's jump up and down, and like it's nothing cheesy. It's a lot more melancholy and like melodic and like mature, and they've always hinted at that, and I think that that's what's really beautiful about them, you know. And that's what I'm like. That's the direction you need to go into, instead of more into a heavier route, because that's not actually what you listen to. That's not actually who you are, you know? Mm-hmm. For sure. So do you see in this album, do you see a lot of yourself in the songwriting, in the arrangement of everything, or?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Yeah. Like if anything, I see myself as like someone who encouraged and facilitated the growth in the songwriting and the potential of the ability to achieve the desired end results. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
Like I don't write their songs. You know what I mean? Like I nudge ideas and I help things reach their fullest potential. That's what I do. You know what I mean? And so it's like when I listen to the album, if anything, I hear like missed potential, if anything, you know what I mean? And those are the things that I voice at all times, is I think that there's more potential here in these areas, you know what I mean? And so if anything, there's only certain areas of the album where I feel like we cut corners and had to, but we ultimately had so many wins that like we're talking very small % of complaints, you know?
For sure. What would it take to get the album to 100%? If you're saying there's missed potential, what would it just be more time or more flexibility between everyone, or
more time, one more communication, less external machine timing of tours and release dates and budgets and et cetera, and more transparency and communication of how to actually curate meaningful content. Like the problem is ultimately like this is where it is in the music industry. We have touring, we have merch, and then we have albums. That's the order of money.
Right.
So albums ultimately curate tours and they curate merch, but they make the least amount of money. So they try to short sight this, and it's not them as a band, it's the management, it's the labels, it's the fucking people who book these records in a fucking time slot that is impossible to make. And when things don't go according to plan, they then start throwing fits and say this is unacceptable. But it's unfortunately a product of a failed and flawed system that is trying to release mediocre content. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. Yeah, definitely.
Because content doesn't actually, it's not valued. You know what I mean? And so that's where, for me, it's I'm the absurd guy who makes things outrageous, because I suggest that we spend the right amount of time and we communicate the right effective ways, the right blunt ways to make sure we address the right problems, and we don't dance around issues and waste people's times, lower morale, and increase budgets.
Yeah, man, that's a pretty vicious circle, because without a great album, you don't have the fans to buy the merch and go to the tour, right? So
but it's not going to make anyone money, so why would why would it matter? You know what I mean?
Man,
why would they want to spend money on the creation of it?
How do you change that, right? Like, how do we move on from that shitty business model?
You be a guy like me who's dedicated his entire life to building a studio that is made to curate content, and you say this is bullshit, and you start your own record label and start curating your own content for free for people that you believe in.
Hell yeah. Sounds like a good plan to me, dude.
That's the only way that we're going to survive, is good dudes like me doing that, as opposed to the failed system trying to take advantage of an old model, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing, man. For sure. Was there anything about this album that was drastically different from the way you approached either previous albums with the band or just previous albums with any band that you've worked with?
Everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Man.
Well, the whole record started with me starting to create the record in Canada, which ultimately is like, all right, why did I go to Canada and start making the record in Canada? Well, the scenario was presented as they didn't want to use my studio because they were tired of my studio and they wanted to use a different studio, but they still wanted to work with me as the engineer. So
okay.
that was the agreement. So I found a studio that was going to make sense for everyone so that we could all go to a cool studio and hang out, but it had to be a studio that was in the budget. And that ultimately presented two scenarios. One, we found a studio that had a better drum room than mine with shittier gear, or one, a place that had better gear than mine with a shittier drum room. And so we chose neither of those. Instead, I chose a cabin that was a really good environment that ultimately didn't have the best drum room, didn't have the best gear. I had to bring everything, but it worked out perfectly. And I got to make the record that I wanted to make and start dabbing at the record that I wanted to make. So that was fine, but that posed its own problems when our gear was 6 days late to the studio. So that changed our days from 25 days to 19 days to make a record.
Holy shit.
So we then had to make a record in 19 days, and ultimately I wasn't able to do pre-pro with the band, which I'm always usually able to do because the band just lives in the area, so they can just come with me and they can just hang out and we can just start working on songs, and that's something that I just throw under the rate, and that's just how we do it. But this is we have this tour planned, we have to have this on these dates, we have to do this. Whatever, I'm trying to be accommodating and be best friends because that's how I do, right?
Right.
So I make this record happen in that area, and ultimately I walk into the studio, gear's 6 days late, and instead of having 10 songs pre-pro, we only have 4 songs to start working with.
Wow.
So we left the studio and we had 7 songs instrumentally recorded. None of them had vocals recorded because we didn't have time to get to them.
Right.
And the time that we tried to suggest recording demos for them, Parker unfortunately was resistant to the idea of doing that. That's just how it went. And so therefore, in their management's eyes, this record was supposed to be completely done in Canada. Why wasn't it done? It required more time, and that was very undesirable for everyone involved.
Gotcha.
And ultimately, it suggested that we had to book more time, start to record more songs, start to keep working on songs that ultimately maybe Parker wasn't going to record vocals on them. So if he wasn't going to record vocals on them, then we should record new songs. So we started doing that and then started cutting old songs. And that was the process of making the record, is ultimately we had to backtrack because we didn't do the right preparation before starting to make the record.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm glad we got into that, man. That's a lot. Sounds.
I mean, that's the reality of like a scenario where ultimately like those are the things people don't want to talk about, and like they don't talk about it and don't explain, but people are like, why are you in Canada? Then why were you in Panda? Well, right. Then it leaves it to a guy like me who's a transparent individual to just say this is the honest truth. Ultimately, I was presented with an opportunity to make a record. I did it in the space that they wanted to make the record with. They didn't bring all the songs to start making the record. Ultimately, I only can make a record with the tools and time and talent that I have. I didn't have the talent. I didn't have the time. And there were not the songs, but there were the tools. You know what I mean? There was, right. I can't make a record that isn't ready to be made.
Yeah.
So it required more time. And that was detrimental to the fact that they had a headlining tour booked that they were ready to release this record around.
Right.
So then they had to release a song and they had to scramble it together so that they could get that ready to go for a single release. So they had that. They had Tom Lord-Alge mix it and ultimately didn't do vocals with me, navigated around me, and we're basically like, we're not going to do vocals with you. Like, give us the sessions. So through all the drama of getting paid to be able to give them the sessions, I finally handed over the sessions. They did vocals for it. It was a terrible process. It sounded terrible. We mixed the single, and ultimately I was like completely demoralized because it didn't sound great, and it wasn't the song, and it was just we were cutting corners, and we were just ultimately doing something because they needed to release something. And that was demoralizing. That's not why I make records. I make records to make a count and not have to do these things twice and not have to go back and revisit these things. Like, so that sucked ass. And ultimately, they then toured around it, like did their single release, and then they hit me up and were like, hey, so we basically need to like finish the record, and like we know we should really do vocals with you. Like, do you want to do vocals? I'm like, yeah, like, I don't know why, like, we had navigated around me. Like, I'm fucking happy to do this and be best friends. Like I've always been, like, let's fucking make this happen. And so we started working on the record again, and everything was fucking sounded great and went great. And by the end of it, everything was done, and it ultimately came to back into management hand. A management hand is like, who's this dude, Sam Pura? We should have someone else mix this record instead of this dude. It was like, all right, here we go again. So, I basically, it was just like, I keep going through the ringer. Like, it's just so annoying to be the dude who's like so emotionally invested in the success of your record. You know what I mean? Like, I want to make something that really counts to me and like really makes me feel passionate and makes me feel something when I listen to your music. Like, that's why I do what I do, And it was demoralizing and upsetting, but ultimately, like, I had to fight and be the bad guy and be the annoying guy, and I won, and I got us the ability to have Eric Valentine mix it. So if it wasn't going to be me, it was going to be my idol Eric Valentine, and he fucking killed it, and it was great, and it was an awesome opportunity to have him mix the album. But like, that's the short answer of like what happened and like the trials and tribulations of making a record,
Yeah, man. Sounds definitely really challenging, really frustrating. Lots of complications, especially you've definitely done good by them over the years. It's unfortunate that things got messy on this one, but
it gets messy on every record, man. I mean, like, there's like, and like, that's the thing is like, there's like there's a negative blog out there that's like tried to fucking destroy me and basically be like, oh, this dude like yelled at me and fucking spit in my face and et cetera. And it's like, dude, like, you guys are just a fucking joke. Like, all I've ever done is try to be best friends and make records that actually count and not cut corners. And if we ever cut corners, then we start receiving the wrath of me being like adamantly and emotionally invested in fighting for the right way to do things as opposed to the wrong way. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And that's my fucking skill. You know what I mean? It's like, people like me don't exist in terms of trying to make these records. They all just want to record bands. People don't want to make things that fucking count. You know what I mean? And that's where it's like, I find that so insulting, and I find it so like, you have an opportunity like to speak and an opportunity to make something great. Like, you have a bunch of followers, you have a bunch of listeners. You have an opportunity to make something natural and organic. Let's fucking do that, and let's make it great and fulfilling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's definitely commendable for sure. So with all that being said, what was your favorite part or the best part or the easiest part about this album to you?
I mean, best part is working with a dude like dudes like Kevin and Ryan, who are just like, all right, man, like, present to me your song. And they're like, this is what I've been working on. And it's like, this is phenomenal. Let's start working on this. You know what I mean? Like, and those are the things where like, once we start like having a clear vision, it's really easy to start heading there. You know what I mean? And like, go down the rabbit hole of capturing the right song,
Right.
As opposed to being like, let's throw some rules down. The rules are, we can only play on Warped Tour. We have to be associated with only pop punk bands.
Right.
We can only play heavy songs. Like, it's like, I want to strip all of that. That shit is so stupid. Like, it's insultingly stupid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and that's like where, like, if anything, like the only place that I pride myself in is like really being the guy who was annoying in terms of like coaching, that we actually facilitate creating something that means something to us as opposed to being just contrived and forced,
I do want to get into a little bit of the production just selfishly because I want to become a better producer and learn from you.
I'm going to probably hit you with a bunch of the same answers all the time on this one. So you'll see what I mean.
Okay. So Out of It came out about a year ago, and really good song. I think it was written super well. The production is great. And the first thing that I noticed when I heard it, it was I don't want to say this like it's a bad thing, but it was not like grungier, less polished, I guess.
I didn't mix it. Tom Lord-Alge mixed it. That's aspect number one that you're referencing right now.
Okay. Yeah, because I heard right away that there was a different touch.
A different mix,
for sure.
Because I've mixed all of their previous stuff, so it was very clear that this was a brand new mix from a different individual.
Right. So I really wanted to know about the Snare Town because I was really captivated by it. I thought it was super powerful. It had like a really great sustain without having any like blaring overtones or anything. And I kind of just wanted to know like everything about it. Like, what, if you can remember, I know it was a while ago, what snare it was, head choice, all that.
So let's talk again. I didn't mix that song. Tom Lord-Alge mixed the song. So like this question of the mix that you're referencing is more so a Tom Lord-Alge question. And the reason why I suggest that is ultimately Tom is a very, very, very awesome dude, but his workflow is something where he ultimately changes the source tone into his source tone. It becomes a completely different thing. So when we're talking about the snare on that song and specifics, like there was a desire to have more room ambience and more room sound. And I know for a fact that he used one specific section of a song where the snare was hit that he thought sounded good. And he used that as his one-shot sample that he printed throughout the song. Now, that's a total smart move and a total cool move, except there's one issue. That snare had a hi-hat in it, so every time you hear that snare on that mix, I hear the hi-hat bleed from a non-existent hi-hat that is opening up on the snare sample. So I'm glad you like that snare. I unfortunately have a little bit of a moral conflict issue with it, but I do like Tom Lord-Alge. He is a great guy.
Man, I I love that I'm not getting any of the answers I'm expecting because I feel like that might be kind of boring. This is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I'm best friends. I will be best friends with you and tell you everything. So,
all right. Well, then let's talk about a song. Well, you didn't mix this album at all, correct?
I did not mix this album, but I did participate in the mix preparation and the ultimate vision that was delivered to my best friend, Eric Valentine, for him to mix and clean up and use. So I do know everything that he was using. I witnessed it.
Okay. Very cool. Well, then can you...
Well, here, let me, before you even ask your question, I'll just give you a quick response here as well, too, is ultimately like a big difference between Tom and Eric is the fact that I've spent so much time creating my sound and doing my thing on my end over here. And a lot of it has a lot of heavy lifting inside of Pro Tools. And that's something where when I give that session to Tom as is, he would break it down and split it out and make it into a different thing, whereas Eric picks it up and takes it from there. So for me to hand a mix over to Eric was a lot more... We already were 90% towards our vision and required him to really fill in the 10% and or even bring it to 110%. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
As opposed to giving Tom Lord-Alge audio files that are like, this is the kick, this is the snare. Right. Instead it's like, this is the Pro Tools session. If you press play, this is going to play back the way that we think sounds good inside of the session we've been working on for the last year.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Awesome.
There's a lot of a difference there because we've already accomplished so much of the overall tone and vibe and view and guide point of that over a year of fucking communication and work. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Yeah.
So that's not something that we're trying to abandon. That's something that we're trying to ultimately improve upon within the time that we have available to us.
Okay,
you know?
Gotcha. So then what is your signal flow or your workflow look like when you're recording? I mean, do you start with drums and you build the song, or do you do all the drums for every song, or is it different?
Well, that's a subjective thing. That's completely different for everything. And like the reason being is ultimately like if we're in the process of making a record for a record label, then I would suggest that we like ultimately create a scenario where we do pre-production for enough time. Mm-hmm. And then once we do pre-production, we ultimately record the record as a demo completely and have like everything worked out with everything. And then we actually go into the process of making the record. You know what I mean? It's like think of it as like filming a test run of the music video that you're about to film. You know what I mean? Or like filming a live performance of a movie that you're about to film before you actually start splitting it up into scenes and doing it. You know what I mean? It's doing the proper preparation, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's where it either depends on if you can accomplish that, then great. Then you could start recording drums first and then record everything on top of that. But if not, it might be best just to record guitars first, bass first, vocals first, and then drums after that. It might be best to record drums last.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, you got to...
There's a lot of structure changes. There's a lot of arrangement changes. There's a lot of things that are possible that like are worth considering. You know what I mean? That you don't want to get held into and locked into and ultimately like have as a detrimental thing where you have to adhere strumming patterns or vocals to drums that are already tracked that you can't redo and can't change. And because the kick pattern isn't correct, you know, those are things that are huge concerns to me that like ultimately make some people hate me, you know?
Yeah, I mean those small details are what makes an album hit hard though. So I love that you put so much thought and care into that.
Yeah, there's like so much more thought and care into that than anyone would ever consider as the main focus point of like with every question like you'd ask on a production end, it would be like, all right, do you think that they spent the most amount of time to make this right? Probably, and or probably not. You know what I mean? And like for this record, it's yes, I did for everything. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like to a detrimentally annoying aspect of. You know what I mean?
That's great, man. Well, I can't wait to hear what came of it. So Take Me As You Please, really different, right?
Yep.
Starts off with like a church organ.
So that's a secret instrument that I don't want to mention. I'm looking at it right now in my studio.
Can you answer the question? Is it a physical synth or software?
It's not a synth and it's not a software, but it is a physical item.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha, man.
And it is used in another aspect of the song that I find as one of the most defining Eric Valentine mix moments of the record in the song as well. We call it the fireworks.
Okay. Great. I think I know what you're talking about there.
So,
yeah.
It's basically like, take me as you please. And then before it goes into the second verse, it goes, and it's got this crazy sound in the background. And that's the instrument that we use some crazy on, that we used as a drone that we created for the entire background of the track as a pad. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, Eric Valentine completely muted it and only brought it in at that moment and at a couple moments at the end of the song. Which, when I first heard the mix, I was very insulted and was like, where is my fucking fireworks track? Why is it not there? And then when he debuted it into that post-chorus before the second verse and the ending of the song, I almost cried, and it made me feel this emotional reaction to the song that I had not felt.
Yeah.
And it really meant something to me.
That's really cool, man. Getting to see your light in a new creation just by someone changing a few things around. That's really cool.
Eric Valentine is my idol. He is one of the best audio engineers in the world, and witnessing him mix the record was the most inspiring thing I've ever seen in my life. And witnessing him mix my material was the most confidence building and inspiring aspect I've ever experienced. Eric Valentine is an amazing human being, and I'm very honored that I had the opportunity to work with him on this album. And we achieved some extremely, extremely emotionally awesome end results working on that album together. Like, so many revisions and so much like communication, and he was completely receptive and completely kind and completely generous, and never once broke confidence, never once broke spirit, and always completely continued to work towards the final end result and destination. And he was awesome to work with.
Do you plan on working with him in the future?
I mean, if anyone can afford him again, sure. He's a human being that completely, he undervalues himself by 200%. He's unbelievable. He's the Dalai Lama of audio.
Wow, high praise, man, for sure. High praise.
Yeah, he's great, and ultimately, like, you know, with tooting his horn so much, it's one of these things where it's like, to have him like involved in the record was like so cool, but ultimately to have him be like, you know, I'd love to mix another record of yours. You know what I mean? Like, It's like, hell yeah, I'd love you to mix another record of mine too. And it's also like cool that like he never, like, there were so many times where he was just like, he would turn around and be like, what'd you use on this? This is cool. What'd you do on this? This is cool. He really enjoyed mixing the record. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As opposed to like mix the record as a point of like, the source tones were detrimental. Like, they were inspiring to him, and they allowed him to like do and experiment and like feel really confident in things that he was doing. Like, that was awesome. You know what I mean? Like, so
power couple.
Yeah, I would love for him to mix more records for him, or master more records for him, or engineer records for him. You know what I mean? Like, it's, yeah, why not? Like, Eric is amazing.
Very cool.
Also, shout out to his wife, Grace Potter, who is a phenomenal vocalist and a phenomenal musician, and I'm pretty sure he's working on a new album with her, so I can't wait to hear it. Both very accommodating, awesome people.
Very cool. Very cool. The acoustic guitar in that song, in Take Me As You Please, is like the acoustic guitar tone of my dreams, man. It's like really chunky, like bottom strings without being boomy.
Yeah,
It's got like a pretty mellow high end that cuts through the mix. Can you talk about the mic choice and placement for that?
Well, I appreciate you asking me about that because that acoustic guitar tone is something that really meant a lot to me and was something that like really posed itself as a scenario that was challenging to make something that was going to be unique and create a unique sound with the tools and time and talent we had. And I don't want to fully give away the secret of that guitar tone, but I'll say that like the big secret is that it is a doubled guitar that's perfectly in tune, and both of them are very sped to be in different tunings than they actually were recorded to create a really beautiful chorusing effect.
Wow. Okay. That's unique for sure.
Yeah, that's something that no one else would be doing today. So, especially without the use of tape and things like that. Like those are Beatles tricks that are things that like are worth exploring, that have value, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Which like to them were posed as challenges that they like needed to overcome that had audible effects that became really pleasing and referenced and like utilized by people that we like love and are influenced by, that are ultimately like pulling source tones from the Beatles without even really knowing that.
Right. That's
like if you actually start going back through your influences and who your influences are influenced by, they're actually pretty much influenced by the Beatles. The Beatles are almost the top of Mount Everest. That's where it comes from.
For sure. Yeah, I made the mistake of, paying so much money for a 4-year audio production program. And we definitely did study the Beatles a lot.
You and many, 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 many people that I know in my life. So I understand where you're coming from, and I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, dude.
That's a very illegal criminal thing that should have never happened in the United States of America. Diploma mills of recording schools. It's honestly ruined a lot of people's lives that I know. And I think that's a very shameful thing.
Well, yeah. It's been 5 years, and I'm still recovering. I've worked in some studios where I've had producers be like, "What the f*** are you doing? Like, why would you ever do that?" I'm like, "Well, that's what I learned." Like, "Well, that's stupid." Or I'd ask them, "Why are you doing that? I thought you couldn't do that." You know?
Well, it's a problem because ultimately, like, to go through it the right way, the way that the system tells you to, is ultimately criminal, and it hurts you financially. And I'm sorry to hear, you know what I mean? And ultimately, like, it like preys upon like a young impressionable person and tries to sell them like an opportunity and a career and something that is actually doesn't really exist, and that's very wrong. And a lot of people that I know and deal with have gone through that, and it's very demoralizing to hear about that.
Yeah, I mean, got me to where I am now, which is a place I'm happy with and comfortable with. So we all live and learn. And now I'm talking to Sam Pura. So it's all good, man. I would rather have $120,000 in equipment than student loans, but
yeah. Well, I got out of my school with $40,000, and thankfully my parents were in a scenario where they were paying for my college and my sister's college at the same time. So I was on the low end of the college payment. So there we go.
Very cool.
40,000 without where other people like who have gone to that school that I've been to apparently it was up to like 200,000 at one point. Like insane.
Oh, wow. Can you say what school?
Yeah. Well, it was Expression New Media, and I think they got bought out, and they're basically just SAE now. Like,
okay, gotcha.
Which is like all like essentially Full Sail, and it's all just like fucking it's all that type of shit.
Yeah, I went to the Art Institute, and damn, dude.
I mean, I just know a lot of people who are really good people that really got caught up in it, you know what I mean? And like really had a lot of potential, and ultimately like became financially like it was at a time before like the fucking like housing crisis where like they were basically giving people loans who shouldn't be given loans, you know? And they were like, it's really like spoken about, and like it hurt a lot of people that I know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like and like it really like ruined a lot of people that I know. Like they've all like they don't work in audio at all. They work in normal fucking jobs, and they like still suffer from those payments. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man, for sure. I definitely know. I've lived through that for sure. Just coming out on the other end of it. So
yep.
But, doing stuff like this is really the best way that I've learned. I wish I could have worked in the studios that I did, because I probably learned more in a couple months there than I did 4 years at school. And I actually learned the proper way of doing things.
No, I get it.
So I keep wanting to go back to Take Me As You Please because, I mean, I've only heard 4 songs of the album, but it stands out so much. It's just such a huge departure of what it was, and especially especially the vocals, right? In all the past albums, you can definitely hear that the vocals are much more complex than what really meets the eye. Mostly for texture, you can hear a ton of extra stuff in there. But again, it's just kind of buried for texture. Whereas in this song, it's more stand out, almost in like a pop inspired way. And maybe that's mainly for mixing, but either way, all those takes were recorded by you, I'm assuming. So I just wanted to kind of hear what you had to say about the inspiration for really making this song, or making the vocals on this song, the standout instrument, because there is so much going on and it's so beautiful. You got the really glassy harmonies panned hard right and left, and just all kinds of vocalizations and like fills in the background, and it blows me away, and I just want to know everything about it pretty much.
Well, I'm happy to hear. I'm glad that you like it so much. Thank you very much. The basic response is like the song is actually really basic when you think about it. There's not a lot going on in it. It's basically like a main acoustic guitar track that has a doubled effect on it, and it's not even real drums. On that song, it's actually just an organ that I have that has like little program beats that are like do 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 do, or like do 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 do, or like weird things like that, like samba, marimba, like
bossa nova.
yeah, exactly. So I just slowed it down and just like created samples of them and like put the beat in of the song, and then we just put percussion, which is just the drummer Ryan playing brushes on a throne, and that's it. Like it's just guitars, that, and then we have the bass overdub, which is we have a bass, and I think we also have the organ overdubbing the keys as well simultaneously, both of them together. Mm-hmm. So there really is nothing else going on. So it just leaves complete room for the vocals to be the shining instrument in that, which is a really vulnerable place to put Parker, and ultimately like suggest that he has to like be really like solid with his like enunciation and his delivery and his performance. And if we're going to do like doubles of things, they have to be perfectly aligned, and they have to be perfectly timed correctly, and they have to be perfectly in tune. And this suggests lots of hard work and lots of dedication if we want to achieve the desired end result. You know what I'm saying?
Right. So you don't with auto-tune in vocal line then?
No, these things are things that we rely on after we capture the performance.
Okay, yeah.
And to capture the performance is the thing that requires the most time. Yeah. Relying on those tools is the easy way out, and is the thing that I want to never do in my life. That is the analog rule in me, is ultimately I want to achieve the performance that makes me feel something before I actually commit to this. Mm-hmm. I don't want to cut corners. I want to make this right.
Yeah.
I don't think that's wrong. You know what I mean?
No, not absolutely.
And so ultimately, these things, like, we come down to like a science of terms of like, I audition every single vocal through autotune. I listen to every single aspect of it and make sure that the timing is exactly correct. And these things ultimately sound autotuned and sound perfect because they f***ing are. Right. That's exactly how they sound. They sound perfect. That's what we achieved. That's the whole point. The right enunciation, the right timing, the right effect, the right double, the right low octave with the right timing, with the right tuning, with the right enunciation, with the right inflection, with the right character, with the right performance. All of those things are the things that I'm looking for. I'm looking for the honesty and the integrity in these things. And that could be annoying when you're going through the process of just recording your record. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. That's incredible though, and that's probably why Eric Valentine loves working with you so much. I mean, it sounds like you do a lot of the work for what would be a mixing engineer's job, right?
I care.
Yeah. But I mean, I've said it shows, you know.
Yep.
And I mean, as someone who, I wouldn't even call myself an aspiring producer anymore, but someone who's been through all of that, I can't listen to things like that and not think that, you know, somewhere a producer was doing that over and over and over and over and over, trying to get it just absolutely f***ing perfect. And
Absolutely.
And it is, man. Like, I don't want to sound too much like a fanboy, right? But I
appreciate it, man.
But I totally
you.
am. Like,
I appreciate you listening and connecting with the songs in a way that make you want to ask how they were created, because we spent so much time to create songs that hopefully make you feel something that ultimately like seeks betterness and perfection in your own life, you know?
Yeah. It's so good, man. Like, it's just, it's so, I cannot wait for the album.
Yeah, man.
I'm taking the day off work and everything.
Yeah, obviously a lot of the like credit goes to the fact that the songwriting from like dudes like Ryan and Kevin are like the huge heavy lifting of that album that like are the huge emotional connection. But ultimately, like, they present an opportunity for me to like really create an opportunity to make something that like emotionally resonates with the listener and makes them connect with the songs and want to listen to them and want to see the band and support the band and be like, and ultimately further the longevity of the band. You know what I mean? Like, that's my goal as a producer. Yeah.
The last song that I want to talk about, not that there's really more to talk about, Upside Down. So this song, to me, it's like a really mellow and, I guess, dynamically consistent song.
Yeah.
There's no real big highs or lows, but the layering of the vocals and guitar harmonies and the washy kind of guitar effects, there's some keys and tambourines that come in and out, is what really adds to the complexity of the song while maintaining its simplicity.
Yeah.
And even though it's like perceived to be the quietest song on the album that we have so far, to me, it's like one of the most intense, and I just would love to hear about the arrangement and the composition of the song, because there's so many things.
Okay, so that song is actually the game changer song of the album. That's the song that, like, when we ran out of material to work on in Canada, I turned to everyone and said, well, then what do we have to work on? Like, we have time. What are we doing? Like, how do we actually continue making a record? And Ryan, the drummer, was like, give me a little bit, I got an idea. And he eventually came together with the whole concept of that song. And I was like, this is fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
And so it was like a garage band, like Wurlitzer, like keypad thing that he did, and like some guitar that he did on a 12 string, and like that was it. And like some basic like stupid MIDI drums. And I was like, this is like, I hear the potential in this song. This is beautiful. And so we like started recording the drums for it. And like, you know, it's like, and when I mean like we started recording the drums for it, I mean like we tuned the drums to the right key of the song. We chose the cymbals that were in the right key of the song. We fucking placed all the microphones correctly, completely changed the microphone setup and the signal flow based upon like all of the other songs, because this wasn't a pop punk song. This was a total different song. Like this is what you do as an engineer who actually really cares about capturing and like creating a thing. You know what I mean? And so we made this amazing drum performance. It got this amazing tone. And like everything was great. And we recorded all the guitars to it. We recorded the bass to it. And the guitars were basically just like some arpeggiated stuff with like some really like simple like overdubbed interval chord progression stuff, but like really simple stuff. And eventually Ryan was like, let's use a 12 string. Let's do like a quick like overdub. And that was like recommended at like 12 o'clock at night, which meant that we weren't done until like 4 o'clock in the morning with that guitar part, because of the amount of like attention to detail that like the intro of the song took and tuning the guitar to it. You know what I mean? Like, like that intro of the song took 4 hours. You know what I mean? Like just for the 12 string, which is like the intro of the song. You know what I mean? Like that's how much attention to detail was like put into like capturing the right performance and the right tuning and the right tone and the right strumming pattern and the right emotion, something that like made me feel something that we could actually move forward and say, yes, that was great. You know what I mean? Like, as opposed to, yes, you recorded the intro, let's move on to the verse. Let's now you play guitar into this part, and like you're playing through amplifier that you like. Great, amplifier sounds good. I like that. Like that's just so stupid. You know what I mean? That's so insultingly stupid.
There's a lot of acoustic on the songs that we've heard so far, and I love that.
Yeah, acoustic's hard, bro. It's real hard. That's some hard to do, dude.
Not that I could like say I've tried on a level that you have, but it never works for me, dude. Like ever.
It's hard, man. Like you got one, you got to have a good part. 2, you got to have a really good player. 3, you got to have a really good environment. Like your acoustic is only good as your environment. You could use the as acoustic as long as it's in the right like environment.
Yeah.
I have like 7 rooms in my studio. I can put you in anywhere, and like we'll find the right room that is going to make you sound good with your acoustic. You know.
Yeah.
We explore the space.
That's awesome. So
Yes.
I say this loosely, but I'm a drummer, so I'm really interested in drum tones. And snare drum is super deep. And you said you tune that for the song.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it sounds like a really deep snare. Am I totally wrong with that? Or do you remember dimensions?
I mean, it's different for every song, to be honest. Like it depends on what song is the one that's closest to the tuning. And like your perception of deep snare is a snare that hits the right note of the song that is like hitting really well and consistently and sounds great. Like if you have like, well, I'm like thinking of the song that doesn't even exist, but it's a song called Skate, where it's just like the snare tone in the intro is just like the best sounding snare on the record, but it's like the bass is just like do 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 do. So like since that's the note, that's like the key of the song.
Right.
So the snare is like do do ga ga do ga ga do do ga ga do ga ga da do ga 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 do ga ga. Like you got to have the snare that is the 5th inside of the song.
Definitely.
And if you hit the 5th, that's the fucking key of the song. Like that's just where it lives. You know what I mean? Like that's where it wants to live. That's what the song is asking of the snare drum. It's not asking for it to be anything else, unless it's like a completely higher octave or like overtone that sounds so like perfect with it or whatever. Like that's my belief system, is like everything I'm doing is just a melodic thing. Like I love Taylor Swift songs. I love like all this stuff. I want to be perfect Star Wars records. That's my fucking goal. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing wrong with that. Like
very cool. So I worked with producers that will tune a snare like 4 or 5 times throughout the tracking of one song. That sounds like that might be you then, right?
Well, every single section of a song. So if we're talking the intro, that's one section. Then we're talking about the verse, that's another section. We're talking about the pre-chorus, that's another section. If we're talking about the chorus, that's another section. Like all of that, we tune, we check, we make all that stuff perfect, and we make sure that we did the right thing for the right thing.
Definitely. That blew my mind the first time I saw that, because I've never tried to be a professional musician.
You start to see where this becomes annoying, right?
Because like,
you know what I'm saying?
I'm the kind of guy that I played in bands for years, and I had the same. First of all, I just changed the snare head on my snare for the first time since I bought it when I was 11 years old, 16 years ago.
Who are you?
And
you're weak. You are weak.
And like would tune my snare drum every like 3 years, just like a total piece of shit. So,
yeah, that's a total piece of shit. That's very weak.
But I've never called myself a professional.
Hey, if it sounds good, whatever. Who cares?
So
yeah, I mean, I only get to this point by going through the experience of making records so many times that I start landing on these as my observations or the things that I find that are told to me that I try, and they become, an absolute rule of thumb for me because they prove themselves as true,
Yeah, makes a huge difference for sure.
Yeah. Ultimately, like I always go back to this because it's like so insulting to think otherwise, but like I'm literally just trying to be best friends with everyone and make the best material possible and not cut any corners. And I think that that's the best way of being best friends. Is like we have to address everything,
Yeah. Love it. So when you're writing harmonies, are you trying to hit certain chords, or are you just trying different things over and over until you find something that you love?
So that's a fun thing, because basically with harmonies, I don't want to work with harmonies unless they're presented to me.
Okay.
So like you'll have to sing your harmony to me, but then I'll do the math and I'll find like if there's any mistakes in there, and I'll make sure that we change things to fix those mistakes. And like lots of those things are things like we're talking like if a kick pattern is like boo boo ga boo, the vocal can't be anytime. It's got to go anytime.
Right.
Because the kick is boo, boo, got boo.
Yep.
It's got to be anytime as opposed to anytime. You know what I'm saying? Like those are like small 16th note differences that make me distracted and lose all of my focus on a song that I think sounds possibly perfect. You know, I have to fix those things. I have to present these issues, and I have to focus on these hyper details that maybe are so annoying that someone says, I'm not going to punch that, I'm not going to fix that, who the cares? And it's like, no, this is honestly the best way, especially because with the harmony, if we're doing the harmony's got to do the same exact thing and follow correctly because the note difference is different. It's a fucking 16th note that is changing between two intervals. Like, we have to fix this. This is a mathematical melodic equation. And that maybe becomes annoying and portrays me as a freak that is like undesirable to work with. But that's what I want to do, man. Like, that's the records I want to make.
Well, you're in good company. Like, this might just be a desperate attempt to relate to you, but I was in a band. I was the singer and wanted to kind of play that like producer role as we were writing songs. And our bass guitar and kick drum weren't meeting up on this one part. And we just spent like weeks trying to get it right. And I was always on the guys, like basically what you said, like everything needs to line up. This is a mathematical equation. Things just have to be a certain way. I eventually got kicked out of the band because they couldn't deal with it. So it's
man. I mean, it sucks. I have a lot of falling out with a lot of people, and like a lot of people don't like working with me, and like some people are like adamant about trying to portray me as like so difficult or like talk shit about me and are just like, I don't know why you still with that fool. Like, it's just whatever. You know what I mean? Like ultimately, like, you either get me or you don't. I'm a very polarizing individual, and all I've ever done is fight for the integrity of the actual creation of content that I'm making with the individuals who I feel like respect my time and the ability to create something that's even better and beyond them on themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like, we may be on different planes, but I totally get that.
Yeah, I'm presenting an opportunity of a space that is like I've built, and I have the amps, I have the guitars, I have the space, I have the drums, I have the preamps, I have the mics. I'm ready to make the record that you want to make. Like, I'm just trying to be best friends. You can record your band with anyone else. If you're trying to make a record, like, that's what I'm trying to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible, man.
Thank you, man.
Not that I would ever be in a position to work with you, but that sounds like some shit I'd love to get into for sure.
I appreciate that, man. That's ultimately what I'm trying to portray, is just like transparency and a willingness to actually like make it count, you know?
Yeah, for sure. So I initially wanted to start this like asking really detailed questions about like the production and mic and stuff. I got a couple of those in, but honestly, with the way the conversation went, I just didn't even really find myself caring that much anymore because there's like so much more to this than just what mic did you use, whatever.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate the conversation that we had. I am really appreciative of the fact that, you know, I reached out to see if you would do an email interview. You asked for a phone call. I asked if I can record it for a podcast, and it was just
yeah, why not?
Yeah, no, man. I really appreciate it. Just wrapping up a couple things that I just wanted to ask. So I saw a couple of videos of you teaching like EQ and compression on just like some YouTube tutorials. Is that something that
Creative
you
Live,
plan to do more of?
So I have some kind of quasi scheduled with Nail the Mix to do some stuff.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
And so like I'm happy to like do more of that. I mean, I'll be honest, like there are things that I feel like a little morally objected to, and like a little like I don't want to share a lot of my IP, you know what I mean? But like I ultimately like a lot of my IP is really just like ultimately it's when I start breaking it down, I'm really just following my own gut instinct and my own like intuition and my own experience with the people that I'm dealing with, and vibing it out, and really just there's no explaining it other than like I'm just going for it. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
So it's never the same. It really is different. So it's kind of like a subjective thing where like even if I do talk about it, like it doesn't even really matter because it's like I can't even do the same thing twice. You know what I mean? Like, right. Good luck. Yeah, like for me, like good luck redoing the records that I've done for myself. Like I can't redo those. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if any other people could like do better with the tools and time that I was presented with at times. You know what I mean? Like maybe they could, maybe I couldn't. I don't know. Like, but ultimately, like every single day, I just walk into my studio and I just try to make something that matters to me and is going to make me be like, great, this is going to count. This is going to do something. Like I think that people are going to connect with this, and like this is what's up. You know?
Yeah. You know, I worked with Taylor Larson for a bit up in Bethesda, Maryland. He's done
Nice, man.
like Periphery and all those guys.
Yeah, I know who Taylor is.
Yeah. So
yeah, Taylor's a proud boy.
dude, he drove me fucking crazy
proud.
because
He's very proud. I'm throwing good shade in there if you didn't realize that, but yeah.
So the thing that really drove me crazy was I wanted to learn so much from him, and I would ask him about like, you know, why specifically are you boosting this or why are you doing that? And he would just be like, the vibe, man. It's all about the vibe. You got to get the vibe.
Yeah.
Is it vibey or is it not? And it just seemed like to me it drove me fucking crazy. But like what you're saying is it's not something you can just sit down and teach someone. You got to like feel it in your heart and do what you can at the time.
Honestly, I think that the stuff that Taylor's done is really good. I think that he sounds great. Like, also shout out to my friend Paul Levitt, who like kind of helped like Taylor get where he's getting.
Yeah,
Taylor's a good guy, man. I mean, he's got some good sounds, and like he does things the right way, and like his signal flow is like something that makes sense to me, and like I agree with it. Like I understand what he's going with. Like I think Taylor's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I loved working with him. It was just the vibe. Like, what do I do with that? But it's something, yeah, that you just got to experience over years and years and years, and a lot of mistakes and a lot of reorganizing and just doing it over and over. So
yeah,
there's a lot of work. It really shows. What I've heard on the album so far is just super good. I think the direction they're going is great. And sure, you had just a big hand in that, all things considered.
Yeah, I definitely won't send you the album after this.
Okay. Well, I don't even want to hear it, dude. So
yeah, that's good code, right? Yeah, I won't be the guy that sent you the album after this. Yeah.
And I won't be the guy that leaks it to AP. Just kidding. I absolutely would never do that.
Yeah, so good.
I'm sure this probably already went out there. I usually
maybe you'll accidentally post the wrong song online instead of the right song.
So you've mentioned.
So good.
You've mentioned it a few times. You have your own podcast, Best Friends with Sam Pura, right?
Yeah.
Cool. I've listened to a few episodes. I didn't know when I asked you to do this that you had your own.
Yeah, man. I'm a very transparent, very critical individual, and that may hurt me or that may help me, but whatever. I don't care. One life, right?
Well, it gets you in front of the people that really want you for who you are, right? I mean, I don't think.
Yeah, man. I'm just trying to make great content and be best friends. You know?
Love it. So I'll put a link in the show notes to your podcast. You want me to hook up the Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff? Or
yeah, the other important thing to mention is 38.
Yeah, 38. Dude, I'm not even fucking kidding you, dude. I wrote in my notes, I wanted to close the episode as what the is the deal with 38? Because I've heard it a couple times.
38. 38's my thing. It's coming next year in 2019. Oh. If you're ready for it, I got some stuff for you to subscribe to.
Okay.
If you're ready to subscribe, I got some stuff for you.
Okay. Well, we'll put all of that, whatever you want, out there for the world.
Get it out there. It's thirtyeight.life.
thirtyeight.life. Damn. That's a cool was that TLD, right?
That's a very good that's my domain. That's literally, if you type in the word thirtyeight.life, that's my domain.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I'm going to get on that as soon as we hit stop here.
Yeah, and you'll find a stop page that has no website. It's so good. But eventually it'll be up. I promise.
Very cool.
It's so good.
Well, Sam, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time. It's super hard to come by these days. The story so far, I think we're releasing
anything to be best friends, dude.
I think this is going to come out on release date, maybe a couple days before. I'm not sure. September 21st, the album is coming out. You could hear all the work Sam has put into it. I'm excited. I'm legitimately taking the day off just to lay in bed and listen on repeat because that's the kind of person that I am.
Well, you're going to enjoy it.
I can't wait. I'm sure I will.
Yeah, man.
All right, dude. We'll have a good one.
Absolutely. Peace.